Hi, I'm Tim Travis of Xbox Reviews and Verdicts, and today I'm here to review Bioshock Infinite from Irrational and 2K Games. There's just no getting around it. The original Bioshock was an absolute classic. Not only was it a supremely solid single-player FPS with unique mechanics, but its art direction, powerful narrative, and sense of place secured it as a favorite among gamers and critics alike. Beyond that, Bioshock was the rare game to provide social commentary to complement its stellar elements, challenging many players' minds just as much as their trigger fingers. Not only is Bioshock one of the greatest games of this generation, but for many, including myself, one of the greatest games ever made. The City of Rapture will never be forgotten, but Ken Levine and the wizards at Irrational invite players to a new world. A city in the sky, and a game that is just as ambitious as its forebear. So what's the verdict on Bioshock Infinite? Let's find out. Booker DeWitt is in debt, and he has one simple obligation to fulfill: find Elizabeth and bring her back to New York for a clean slate. He is taken to a mysterious lighthouse off the coast of Maine in search of this young woman, but unknowingly he is whisked away to the floating city of Columbia, an extremely religious mirror image of early 20th century America that worships the founding fathers as godlike figures. It turns out Elizabeth is a peculiar girl, as she is found in captivity and has the ability to tear into other worlds. After Booker rescues her, the two must work together to escape from Columbia and its founder, Father Comstock. It's no surprise Infinite is set in a well-realized fictional city, and the opening 30 minutes do an amazing job of showing you what the city is like. It might even be the best introduction gaming can offer this generation. Columbia's staggering beauty contrasts with the population's radical religious and racist undertones. It's a far more clever opening than that of the original Bioshock. Instead of showing that a city with a certain ideal inevitably failed, Infinite instead does more subtle things that will make many very uncomfortable while Columbia is still standing, such as treating the massacre at Wounded Knee as the victory at Wounded Knee, and showing an interracial couple berated in front of a large crowd. Infinite is not afraid to show you what our country actively represented in this time period. Colored restrooms are present, anti-immigrant and xenophobic propaganda is strewn throughout a museum, and a mile-high, solid gold statue of a company's owner is set against a backdrop of exploitation. This stuff is cleverly dispersed throughout the adventure, primarily during the first half of the game. Some of this stuff could hit too close to home for some, and there will be plenty of players who will look at this world and feel these troubling themes may still have some relevance in modern America. But on the other hand, Infinite is a far more character-driven story than that of the original, with some excellent voice acting for Booker and Elizabeth. Elizabeth in particular couldn't be better animated, especially in cutscenes.
Elizabeth, you
promise me.
I will stop him.
That is an oath you cannot keep. But promise me that if it comes to it, you will not let him take me back.
It won't come to that.
If you've played a Bioshock game before, you'll be very comfortable with Infinite. On the surface, it's a standard shooter with guns inspired by early 20th century designs. But don't take that as having an arsenal that feels outdated. All the shooter staples are here, including semi-automatic pistols, machine guns, sniper rifles, and explosives. These can still be upgraded, but they no longer offer cosmetic differences. You can only keep 2 weapons on you at a time, so you can no longer hold an entire arsenal in your back pocket, but it didn't feel like a distracting issue. However, I did find myself trying to use the Y button to switch weapons countless times during the first half of the game. Vigors, on the other hand, are the substitute for plasmids, but they function very similar to that Bioshock staple. Devil's Kiss allows you to throw fireballs, Bucking Bronco kicks enemies into the air, Shock Jockey can stun enemies, and so on. You no longer purchase these powers with some kind of secondary currency, they are given to you intermittently throughout the game. Your health still does not regenerate, but the addition of a rebounding shield is very welcome. The combat is considerably faster in certain instances with skyline combat. Early in the game you are given a skyhook, which can be used as a melee weapon, but also allows you to jump to and ride skylines around Columbia. You can get to higher elevations with ease doing this and get a lethal drop on enemies. It's incredibly satisfying, and skylines are a meaningful addition to the game. Combat is brutal. Enemies fizzle to death when electrocuted, headshots are bloody as hell, and executions are gasp-worthy. Some of the enemy types even fit in with the game's themes. Motorized patriots reflect Columbia's view of the founding fathers being aggressive nationalists sent by God, and the hulking handyman is clearly being forced to do its job, reflecting the poor working conditions of the early 1900s. Enemy variety is definitely on display here, making combat even more satisfying than it already is. Elizabeth is also a companion for the majority of the game, and any concern that Infinite would become one big escort mission is unfounded, as she is in reality the one escorting you. She'll give you ammo, open locked doors, open tears to give you an edge in combat and revive you, effectively replacing the old Vita chambers. She'll even throw you a buck when you're near a vending machine.
Okay, catch!
That'll do.
She's so helpful that you will miss her on the occasions she's not around and wish allies in any other shooter could be half as helpful as she is. Elizabeth has some incredibly smart AI, though it is comical that enemies avoid her entirely, but in non-combat situations, you'll see her interact with the environment in believable ways. Infinite is a largely linear affair with the occasional side objective and chance to explore. It'll last you around 8 hours on the normal difficulty, and it's worth a trip on hard. Then there's the 1999 mode, a love letter to anyone who thinks games have gotten too easy after the turn of the century. 1999 mode is even more difficult than hard, and the punishment for death is heftier. It's not for the faint of heart. From a presentation standpoint, Infinite is just as much the marvel the original game was. It's a technical and artistic masterpiece. Maybe Infinite doesn't have the very highest polygon count in comparison to games like Gears of War or Crysis 3, but when the imagery is of this level of quality, it's hard to care. The art is staggeringly good, making the idea of a flying city almost believable. Infinite possibly has the most vibrant color palette you'll ever see in gaming, especially in the realm of shooters. You'd never have guessed a video game could look like this. Maybe there's the occasional dated particle effect or a few late game frame rate drops, but it's far from a big issue. The sound is excellent. As previously mentioned, the voice acting is solid and the music is equally so. There's plenty of old-timey stuff and some religious elements. It's all top notch. And there's one late game boss that will blow your mind with its accompanying sound design. The story between Elizabeth and Booker is great. Maybe not the very best relationship you'll see in gaming this generation, but it's exceptional. However, there were unfortunate nagging issues about the story that kept Infinite from being the near flawless experience it should be. The original Bioshock told a story that had philosophical undertones, but put it in a game that can be understandable to those who didn't know what the City of Rapture truly represented, yet provided a certain nuance that can make philosophical types think about Rapture's values of free market capitalism in a very real and meaningful way. Infinite does not fully please either of these parties. In the previous game, Andrew Ryan defended his ideals despite the fact that his city was crumbling. It was a story about how men with uncompromising principles can ultimately destroy the world they helped create. Here, the city is a backdrop and not the driving force of the narrative. Comstock, the game's primary antagonist, is barely present when we needed a character to speak for the city while the player is actively tearing it apart. I couldn't escape the feeling that Bioshock's writers were far better storytellers in the first game when the primary storytelling mechanism was done with audio logs. Speaking of which, these pre-recorded diaries, something that was handled so expertly in the first game, felt underdeveloped here. The dialogue is too dry and lacks meaningful content. The story becomes less about Columbia and more about mysterious occurrences like the regular appearance of the Lutesses and Booker's strange dream sequences. Yeah, the mysterious elements that foreshadow the built-up conclusion could be fantastic in any other game, but here it's less fascinating than what was shown throughout the intro. In Bioshock, the primary plot and the sense of discovery complemented each other. In Infinite, these elements feel like two completely different experiences, and the primary narrative is hurt because of it. It's painful that the first hour and occasional trips to populated areas show such an interesting and thought-provoking world, but in reality, the aspects shown here are not utilized in the context of the main plot like they should be. It's not helped that the few morality decisions in the first half of the game feel exceedingly pointless, and without spoiling anything, the ending is downright impressive but completely obscure. It will be loved by many, but could alienate many others. Infinite is trying to carve its own path through its character-driven story, but often ignores the history and principles of the city it's set in. In many ways, it doesn't feel uniquely Bioshock.
Been living down in Frankton so long, and the man has gone native!
In terms of gameplay, graphics, art, and a sense of place, Bioshock Infinite is practically unmatched. But if the developers and writers had done a better job leveraging the elements that make Columbia such a unique setting for a video game, Bioshock Infinite would have been just as much the instant classic the original was, and much more. But that doesn't mean it's not worth your time and even multiple playthroughs. Infinite is a stalwart experience. It's an exceptionally crafted adventure, and Columbia is one of the best settings for a video game since Rapture.
Will the circle be unbroken?
Thanks for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope you enjoy my future videos.
Is a better